This video is an explanation about the new labor and socialist organizations that were coming about in Europe at the end of the 19th century. In most countries, the number of urban workers was rising. Factory workers were dominating as the number of skilled workers was dropping. There also became more unskilled workers in transportation, shipping, and building businesses. Workers stopped rioting and protesting, and they started to turn to socialism, political parties, and trade unions to get what they wanted. Trade unionism became prominent in the second half of the century once there were legal protections to unions. In Britain, unions were legal in 1871, while in France, Napoleon allowed weak labor associations as his power started to decline in 1868. The Third French Republic legalized unions in 1884, and Germany permitted unions after 1890. Unions directed their efforts to skilled workers and attempted to improve wages and working conditions. Industrial unions for unskilled workers started to become organized at the end of the century. Employers were not a fan of large unions because they often involved themselves in strikes that were targeted toward the employers. Before World War I, there were multiple strikes because unions wanted their wages in line with the inflation. Despite the amount of unions, most of the labor force was not unionized at this time. However, unions served as a way to associate with one another in terms of economic hardship. In terms of democracy and political parties, most European nations, besides Russia, adopted great democratic electoral systems at the end of the 1800s. Great Britain had passed 3 Reform Acts by 1884, and Bismarck brought male suffrage to Germany by 1871. In France, there was a French Chamber of Deputies that had been elected, and male suffrage was adopted in Switzerland in 1879, Spain in 1890, Belgium 1893, Netherlands in 1896, and Norway in 1898. Finally, in 1912, Italy also adopted suffrage. This addition of democracy allowed for organized political parties that were already taking place in the United States. New voters were mobilized because of the organized political parties that had newspapers, workers, social life, offices, and discipline. The working class made up the largest group of electorates. Socialism opposed nationalism. Socialism was supposed to unite the working class all over Europe, but socialists failed to realize how powerful nationalism was. The question that baffled socialist parties was whether revolution or democratic reform would help the working class. This eventually led to a divide in socialist parties. Karl Marx took a different approach with his public and practical political activity. He said in his inaugural address for the First International that he approved workers and trade unions to change the conditions of labor. British Unionists did not want anything to do with the events in Paris earlier in the century. The French used the uprising of the Paris Commune, however, to suppress socialist activity. The First International held its last European Congress and soon transferred its offices to the U.S., and it eventually dissolved in 1876. This short-lived program had an immense impact on socialism. Marxism became an important branch of socialism, and Marx drove out almost all of the reforms of socialism, including anarchy. In Great Britain, the new unionism organized many of unskilled workers. Keir Hardie was the first independent working man to be elected to Parliament. Labor's general political activity remained limited for a while. In 1901, the House of Lords, which acted as Britain's highest court, removed legal protection previously given to the unions. The Labour Party was created, but their goals did not include socialism. Britain's most influential socialist group was the Fabian Society, and they had a gradualist approach. Most of these were civil servants who believed problems of industry, expansion of ownership, and direction of production could be solved in a peaceful and democratic manner. Liberal Party members were afraid of losing seats in Parliament, so they eventually brought back the protection of the unions. In France, there were 2 major factions of socialism, led by Jean Jaurès and Jules Guesde. Jaurès thought socialists should cooperate with the middle-class ministries to guarantee the passing of social legislation, where Guesde thought socialists could not support a cabinet they wanted to overthrow. The Second International was created to unify the many socialist parties. Congress ordered socialists to form a single party, so they began to work together to create the Socialist Party. In Germany, the German Socialist Democratic Party was established, and its success kept Marxist socialism alive. Finally, in Russia, they reached their industrial age, and it was beginning to go through issues that other countries went through a half a century before. Tsar Nicholas II wanted Russia to become an industrial power. Count Sergei Witte led the country to this time, and he appointed First Minister of Communications and was also appointed Finance Minister. He exemplified 19th century modernizer. He was able to establish a strong relationship with France in terms of economics, and this later led to a French-Russian alliance. Industrialism brought socialist discontent. By 1900, there was more than 3 million Russian factory workers. Russian agriculture was also not prosperous. There was a new social revolutionary party that opposed industry and thought communal life of rural Russia should be the model for the future. There were now two factions, the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, translated to minority, and Bolsheviks translated to majority. The Bolsheviks intended for their party to be elite professional revolutionaries who would give centralized leadership for the working class. Lenin added to this organized theory with a revolution program where he urged socialist revolution to unite the workers and the peasants. Lenin's two-part principle, the elite party and dual social revolution, helped to guide the Bolsheviks. There were multiple revolutions taking place, and in 1906, Tsar Nicholas II created the Duma, a representative body with two parts. All in all, this time period was filled with reform in terms of labor and socialisms, and in terms of people organizing themselves to get what they want.